All right, so moving along with our speakers, this next speaker, I'm a big fan of this guy. I just think he's just so cool. He's so salt of the earth. He goes by the name of Chuck Cook. You guys know Chuck? Let's give a hand for him. So I'll tell you a little something for those of you who don't know. Chuck is a FSD guru and pilot. And big thanks to our Falcon Heavy sponsors, Tint World. You can see their booth right over there. They have locations in downtown Orlando, North Orlando, Longwood, and on the Space Coast here in Melbourne. They are a full customization shop offering everything you could add on to your Tesla, including tints, rants, PPF, audio, ceramic coatings, lighting, performance, and more. Go check them out over their booth. But next, Chuck, such a pleasure, sir. Thanks for coming by. You have about 20 minutes. We'll go to like 12:25, and then if you want to do any question and answer before that. But until then, take it away, Chuck. Let's have a big hand for Chuck Cook.
Awesome. Thanks for you guys being here. Thanks for that nice intro. AJ, did you make this slide? Thank you. Because they were like, hey, Chuck, you got to give us something for the deck. And I'm like, and then next look, there's a slide up here. So I didn't make any slides because I'm just going to sit up here and talk to you a little bit about, I'm going to stay in my lane. First of all, Justin and the crowd going all the way up north, I don't have anything that exciting to talk about. But a little bit about me before we go into a little bit of subject to FSD. My name's Chuck Cook. You guys know me by name and kind of where I fit in the Tesla community. I just sort of dropped in there with something that happened by circumstance. I got my first Model Y a little bit late. I'm 2020. I got the brand new Model Y. I was kind of waiting on the right size car. My kids were at a certain age where the Model 3 wasn't going to work, and I was waiting on the Model Y. And I got one of the very first ones and jumped in full force. And I'm kind of a geek by nature. Well, most of us probably are in here, so that really doesn't really resonate necessarily with this group. Kind of a computer programmer, developer. I'm an engineer by trade from college, but I spent a lot of time in the Navy and wrote software in the Navy while I was sitting on aircraft carriers in the middle of the Persian Gulf, keeping myself busy. But when the Model Y came out, FSD was kind of new. And I'm sitting there at work, and a buddy of mine at work, and I work at JetBlue. I'm an airline pilot. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit too. And a buddy goes, of all people that I know, you need a Tesla. I'm like, you're probably right. So I went out and got one, and he goes, you need to get FSD. It's coming out. So I was in a hotel in New York, because my team was up in New York, in Long Island City up there. And I'm like, I'm going to write an email and just kind of say who I am. And at the end of the email, I'm going to just say, I think you need me. So I emailed whatever emails I could come up with at the time. And I think it was like early access at Tesla.com. There was a few other ones out there that people had where it was kind of like if you were on the early access program, that was one email that really wasn't public, but it worked. So I wrote early access at Tesla.com, a long email just kind of giving my resume, my background, my engineering experience. And I said, I'm a Model Y owner, and I think I'd like to support you guys in developing FSD. Nothing heard. And then 3 months goes by, and I get a phone call. I'm also at the hotel, and it's like, hi, Chuck, this is so-and-so from the early access program at Tesla. And I'm like, what? And he's like, we're going to be pushing some software to your car, and we just want to make sure you're still all in. And I'm like, yeah. And next thing you know, my VIN number was on this magic list that we all kind of know as the early access list. And next thing you know, my Model Y started getting these early access updates of FSD. And we were on version 8 dot something at the time. And this is in October of 2020, if I have my dates right. So they started pushing these things, and FSD was just a bunch of dots. And if you go back on my early videos, and anybody that had FSD, and there's some of you here in the room that had it back then, it was very, very crude, but it looks so cool. And it was just like, wow, this is the latest. And it's scary for me to think that I really let the car drive itself on that first software version, as compared to where we are now, because as compared to where we are now, it was so crude. But at the time, I felt like a test pilot again. I really did. And honestly, I think that's a little bit also how I fit in here, is I come at it from an aviation perspective. In the aircraft I fly, I'm an Airbus captain on the Airbus A321. I've flown the Boeing 737 and other transport category aircraft, and then the S-3 Viking in carrier aviation in the Navy. there's a little bit of a balance between automation and automation management. And I think this is an important part for those of you that use FSD to really try to separate, oh, look, the car is driving, from you as an automation manager. Because in aviation, we train pilots, and I just had my recurrent training last week, and I was in the simulator here in Orlando for 3 days straight getting check rides. But we teach pilots different levels of automation and how to manage it. Because when automation fails, you need to lower to the next level of automation, and either the aircraft is still flying or the car is still driving, or you're now taking charge, or you're taking control of the situation to ensure the situation is safe. I just described that because we're doing the same thing with FSD, especially while we're in the supervised state until June, we hope, at least in some scenarios. And I think when you're driving your car, keep that self in mind, that you are a supervisor and you're ensuring the safety of that vehicle in the surrounding environment, but you're also managing the automation that's doing a fantastic job. But every once in a while it needs a little nudge or a little accelerator tap or perhaps a brake tap or take over or do something different. So the feedback I started providing in video, where I'm talking out loud, kind of like I'm doing to you now, started resonating a little bit in 2020, 2021. And then I started getting some weird emails of, that apparently were coming through the team of things Elon was saying in meetings about FSD, saying, you better get out there to Jacksonville and fix that dang turn that Chuck's putting on YouTube. And that's kind of where this unprotected left turn I do in Jacksonville, Florida. And if you don't know what my turn is, I'm sorry, I'm kind of skipping over that part. There is this turn coming out of my neighborhood, and it is literally a block from my house, where you cross 3 lanes of high-speed cross traffic, and those cars are going about 60, 65 miles an hour. There's a little bit of a median where a normal-sized car will fit, and then you join 3 lanes of traffic on the other side. Everyone in Europe thinks that Americans are crazy for having roads like this, but those of you that live here in Florida understand they're everywhere. The dangerous part about it is not crossing the traffic, it's the high-speed cross traffic coming from 90 degrees. And anyone that's ever been trained in relative motion or has driven a boat or flown a plane knows that the highest angle of incidence is at 90 degrees cross traffic. Everything else is a vector that comes from a different angle. Well, that's what makes this hard, because we have one camera looking to the left. It's called the B-pillar camera. It's the only one that can see to the left. And on our Hardware 3 vehicles, initially, it's a pretty low resolution camera of 1.2 megapixels. Hardware 5 has 5 megapixels. It's getting a little bit better with resolution. But that is what has made this hard for them to solve. So anyway, this story evolves, and in version 10.69, kind of ironic if you remember when that release came out, they put my name in the release notes that said, "This will fix Chuck's left-hand turn." And I was like, oh my gosh, my name's in the release notes. And I went out there and I showed my kids, and they said, this is pretty funny, Dad's name's in his car now. And it turned into a little bit more when that happened, and at shareholders meetings, a few other things, there were just some comments about it. And I guess that's kind of even why I'm standing up here, is because of that turn that has become famous. But they are still testing this turn, and I have a camera mounted on the oak tree in my front yard that points at this turn, and I've got a computer program I've written that monitors the video stream 24/7 and captures images of every Tesla that drives by, and it categorizes them, and I go through them every single day, so I know within minutes if a Tesla 8S driver has been testing the turn, and it's turned into a canary in the coal mine for when the next version of FSD is coming out, because Tesla sends their drivers out to my street to test this turn. It's kind of a funny story. So I guess I'm still on the intro here. Anyway, that's where this kind of FSD thing came from. And that's kind of my involvement, my background, and kind of why it's so fun to join you guys here. But I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about it, because those of you that have FSD have probably realized we're kind of in a doldrums right now. You know, those of you on Hardware 3 are stuck on 12.64, and those of you on Hardware 4 are stuck on 13.2.8, and we've been there for a while. Now, we've gotten some software updates, but they've had nothing to do with FSD. Some of you may have gotten the spring release that's got some new features and things come out, but that hasn't changed the way your car is driven. We did get a nav update recently, so that may have changed some behaviors of your driving, but that wasn't an FSD update. And you might wonder, what does that shock the VP now of AI software? What are they doing? June, the robotaxi event. Elon drew a line in the sand, and he's driving his team to a June event where they're going to release, hopefully, the first version of unsupervised. And I say hopefully, but they're planning on it. And the reason we have no new public software updates, in my opinion, and I don't have any inside information, is they are heads down focusing on the first robotaxi or cybercab events to be released in June. It could be paired with a shareholders meeting. If those of you looking for dates and go, where is it going to be, what's it going to be about, it's going to be in Texas. And those of you that live in Austin or near Texas, guys like Joe, and they've seen these Model Ys driving around a lot. That we've seen videos on Joe Tegmeyer's videos of cybercabs driving around the property. They're doing it. They're doing unsupervised on private property, and they're using supervised drivers on public roads now with a software app that will act like a Uber or Lyft version. So that's why we don't have any new versions on our car. The same sort of thing happened before the We Robot event, where they were focused and heads down on getting that We Robot event out at Burbank all set up and ready to go. We were in this another dry spell on software. So it's pretty common. It kind of goes in waves, and sometimes we'll get a bunch of point releases. But I think we're in for something new and hopefully a whole lot better. And maybe it'll be an unsupervised version for personal cars, maybe later this year. But I do think there will be a product in June that we're at least going to get to see and maybe experience ourselves taking a ride. The rides that we did get, those of us that were able to go to the We Robot event in Burbank, it truly let you feel it for the first time of what it would be like to be in a Tesla, to get an unsupervised ride. The ride in the cybercab without a steering wheel or pedal was, you can feel it. You can say, oh, I've been in an Uber, or maybe some of you have been in a Waymo out in San Francisco or Chandler, Arizona, or the other places they do that service now. Even if you haven't, I would recommend you do, because there is a little bit of I can see this now. But to see it in your own personal car, or perhaps even consider using your own personal car as a public service, that might be something you need to consider. There are those people that are the Turo types of people that say, no, I'm willing to let someone ride in my car. And then there's those that'd be like, no, this is my baby. Nobody's getting in it. But I want to sit in the back seat, or I want to not have to pay attention or unsupervised or be able to look at my phone without distractions. So I think it's going to cross a broad spectrum of use cases of how people will use FSD. So that's all I really wanted to say is they're still testing FSD on my turn. So something new is coming out, but I don't think we're going to get any sort of state of unsupervised until after the June event, and then it's probably not going to be public to our cars until later into 2025. And those of you with Model Ys, and you're on Hardware 4, you're probably going to get it first. The Cybertruck, I own a Cybertruck and a Model Y, seems to be lagging a little bit. It doesn't drive the same. The Cybertruck still drives like it's wearing a big fat dress. The Model Y is wearing its yoga pants. That's what it feels like when you're driving down the road. So anyway, how about that? Any questions? How long did I? Ooh, a little bit of time.
Let's take some questions from the crowd. I saw this lady here. Would you like the microphone? Here you go. I'll pass it over.
For those of us who own very old classic Model S and have never driven FSD, what is your advice the first time we try it, or do a test drive or buy a car with FSD, and how to approach it?
That's a good question. I do think that Tesla has a gap here in service, in explaining what you have in your car. And I think another Cybertruck owner, he's not here today, Drake, just posted something on X a little while ago about a brand new Model 3 owner that didn't even know his car had FSD capability, even auto steer in the basics. So I think there is a gap of education, and it's people like us in this room that do know how to use it, helping those that haven't done it for the first time, because that first drive can be a little bit uneasy. And I can say that only through like my parents and my, family members and things like that don't have it. They're very, matter of fact, I let a coworker drive my Cybertruck for the first time, and he put the blinker on to do a lane change, and he immediately took over and was like, oh my God, what just happened? I was like, it's just a lane change. So to me, that was nothing, but to him, it was a loss of control. And I think that's what you might be talking about experiencing for the first time is, I'm not sure I'm ready to give up that control. So I would say ease into it, and don't try it in a scenario that is going to make you uncomfortable even if you're driving. Believe it or not, FSD makes me the most comfortable in heavy traffic because it's the driving I hate the worst, but that may be the worst place for you to start using it. So maybe an unpopulated road, maybe a scenario with not a lot of kids or cross traffic or things you personally might be worried about, and just watch how the car handles the lanes, the lane marking, the traffic signals, and the things like that. I'd like to tell everyone that FSD is ready for unsupervised today if there were no other humans or cars on the planet. It is ready for that because the only problem it has is interacting with the world that is not controllable. It knows how to do roads, it knows how to do stoplights, it knows how to do signs. It's the decisions it has to make that are not able to be programmed directly that it does differently every single time. So I would recommend you to try using it, but I also recommend low density traffic, perhaps no kids or scenarios like that, or low speed. And like I mentioned earlier, high speed cross traffic is the pinnacle that I would avoid initially. But don't fear it, and then work your way up. Auto steer, lane, keep it in the basic lane change, and all the way to FSD, which, watching it change lanes around a semi on I-95 is a magical thing once you understand what it's doing. In aviation, we like to tell young pilots, you need to stay ahead of the aircraft. And what that means is you know what the plane is going to do before it starts doing it. You're coming up to a navigation point and there's going to be a turn. Well, that means in your mind, you already know it's going to be leaning over and turning. Just like a turn signal, I can already tell when the turn signal is going to come on now through experience. You might not need to just get those hours or miles underneath your belt. Good question, though.
Great. And actually, Teslatino has a question here.
Hey, Ralph.
Hey, Chuck. As an early access member, there's one thing that I think everyone here should know about, the advantages of using FSD on really long trips. The fatigue or not, the lack of fatigue. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
That's a good point. And this is another aviation correlation, fatigue risk management. And I say risk management because everything we do in our lives, you wake up in the morning, you start managing risk. And you have to accept risks in every part of your life. If you didn't want to accept any risk for the day, you shouldn't get out of bed. But once you decide to get out of bed and walk to the bathroom or go get some coffee for the first time, you're introducing risk into your day. So just like getting in a car and taking a trip to this event or anywhere else, you're introducing risk. What automation can do is lower that risk so that your alertness, your attention, your reaction skills, and also your situational awareness can be heightened. In aviation, we also talk about that as being part of automation management. If you've ever been in a situation where you're sitting in maybe the instructor's chair right here, and you get to watch people in front of you do their jobs, in aviation, we call this the God seat because you're in the jump seat and you can watch the pilots do their work. You can see every single mistake they make. But the pilots that are actually flying the planes are task saturated to what's going on. They may not see something that's going on in the periphery because they're focused on the altitude or they're focused on the airspeed. The same thing happens while you're driving your car. The semi's coming up, somebody's slowing down. How many times have you felt the adrenaline go through your arms when you didn't see the brake lights come on in front of you until the very last second, and that adrenaline came in through your veins? That adrenaline introduces stress, it introduces cortisol from your brain, and that creates fatigue, which is what Raf is talking about. That fatigue can go away when you let the car start driving, and it allows your situational awareness to broaden. You start to see the deer on the sides of the road. You see turkeys coming out to the edge. You see cars further in the distance. You see lanes or cars approaching you through your rearview mirror that you would have never seen before because the automation is taking away brain cycles that you would have normally been doing, thinking about your foot, your brake, or your hand, doing subconscious tasks that you're no longer doing. That is what Broff was referring to in lowering your fatigue. All those tasks take fatigue, and you can now do a 12-hour drive without even blinking because you weren't doing the driving. Anyway, hopefully that addresses your point.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Sir, would you like...
Hey, Chuck, fellow Jacksonvilleite here. Would like to ask you about your take. You've had HW3. I think you currently have HW4. I don't know, maybe, and I heard you mention 5. Could you talk about the differences from 3 to 4 to 5? And is HW3, I heard, going to be potentially replaced in my vehicle?
Very good question, and I've got 2 minutes to cover 20 minutes of conversation. So there's some terms mixed in there. Hardware 3 refers to the chips in your computer that drive your AI computer hardware 3. It also tangentially incorporates the cameras that came along with that system. So generally speaking, the hardware 3 vehicles came out with the AI3 chip and the 1.2 megapixel cameras. They upgraded to a new AI chip. It's got redundancy, a lower nanometer fab process, 5 megapixel cameras, and the associated computer and Ethernet loops to get the bandwidth from those cameras to the chip, improved it. There were some subtle changes that also came with hardware 4 on some versions to include the front bumper camera, also called the fascia camera, on the Cybertruck, and now the new Juniper has it. But the older Model Ys that have hardware 4 do not have that fascia camera. So inside of hardware 4, there's also some subtle configuration differences that could be easily upgraded. I think also the Model 3 Highland has hardware 4, but doesn't necessarily have the fascia camera included on the early vehicles. It will probably be added. That might be something that could be retrofit, but we don't know that yet. And hardware 5 is this new chip they're talking about that has not been fabricated yet. It's in the design and fab process that is being designated for the robotaxi. That they're also saying is going to have so much AI compute, could also be used in idle time to be a cloud network AI compute system that they're talking about in an Amazon Web Services type of AI sharing. So hardware 3 is the lowest version right now that is I don't say the lowest version because there is a 2 and a 2.5 that have some FSD features, but your hardware 3 vehicle is probably not going to be unsupervised, and I'm confident saying that because Elon has said we're probably going to have to update those. But I do want to take the misnomer out that they're going to update it to hardware 4. They have not said that. I think they've just acknowledged publicly that hardware 3 may not be able to go unsupervised. How they get it to unsupervised could be something in between. It could be called a 3.5, a 3.8, a 3.9. We don't know that answer yet, but they've acknowledged some sort of upgrade, and what that manifests itself to be, we don't know, and how it'll be paid for or incentivized, we don't know yet. Free FSD transfer, I think, is an amazing way to incentivize customers to buy a new vehicle, but that's one option. Anyway, thank you guys for the time.
That was great, man. I just love your insight. I think you're so well-spoken, and I just love hearing your take on things and walking the walk and doing the work. So thanks, man. This is so great.
Everybody.
Chuck Cook, everybody. He's great. He's great. He's a gem. All right, so